we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside. For this year's Chautauqua Lecture Series, we will be celebrating the nation's 250th birthday with sessions that explore the cultural and geographic regions of the United States. And this week, as you may know, we're exploring the Great Lakes region, which is known for its abundant fresh water, vibrant outdoor recreation, strong industrial history, and as we will find out, it became a major stronghold of the reviled Ku Klux Klan during the 1920s. And we're fortunate that William Trollinger joins us today for a lecture in the series this week, which is generally supported by Mary Lou and Don Leffler. And this afternoon's presentation, the Ohio KKK in the 1920s, explores the political and social influence of the revived Ku Klux Klan. William is a professor of history at the University of Dayton, a history in PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He writes on fundamentalism, creationism, Christian nationalism, and the Second Ku Klux Klan. He is the author of many books and articles. Most relevant for this presentation is Hearing the Silence, the University of Dayton, the Ku Klux Klan, and Catholic universities and colleges in the 1920s. I would ask if you would please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me in welcoming William Trollinger.
I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. I've never been here, and it's beautiful. Even with the smoke rolling in, it's still beautiful. Thanks much to John for inviting me to speak and for his work in organizing this event. I should note that I'm joined by my wife, Sue, who's sitting up here, who's also a University of Dayton professor. We actually write together, and she gives talks around the state on the Amish and on the women's suffrage movement. Our joke is that she gets the upbeat topics and I don't. Okay. White Christian nationalism is alive and well in the United States and in Ohio. And at the heart of white Christian nationalism is the desire to reclaim America for culturally conservative white Christians, in the process deporting non-white immigrants. The Ku Klux Klan is the quintessential white Christian nationalist organization. White Christian nationalists played an outsized role in the January 6, 2021 insurrection. And there are related groups that may not be explicitly Christian, but are very closely related to white Christian nationalists in their desire to reclaim America for the right kinds of Americans. And I should note that neo-Nazis who are here in Springfield played an important role in spreading the idea that Haitian immigrants were capturing and eating pets in Springfield. Also related, much bigger than the neo-Nazis, better organized than the current Klan, is Patriot Front. Here they are at the U.S. 250th anniversary celebration in Washington, D.C. And if you would just keep this photo in mind for later photos that will show up here. White Christian nationalism has always been here in America. In times of cultural crisis, it just explodes. So it did 100 years ago here in Ohio, throughout the entire state. And while I'm from the University of Dayton, that's how I got into this. On my focus, my examples will be from Dayton. This is a statewide issue in the 1920s, and I'll try to make that clear. Friday morning, September 21, 1923, Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Dayton was abuzz with activity, with robed Klansmen and Klanswomen putting up tents, setting up picnic tables piled with food, planting a 100-foot-high cross wrapped in burlap and soaked in motor oil. At 2 p.m., the speeches began, with local Klan leaders asserting their determination to ensure that the United States would remain a Christian nation run by 100% Americans. Please keep that phrase in mind because that was their favorite, 100% Americans. After dinner, the Klansmen headed out on a parade down Main Street through downtown Dayton to the Miami River and back again. Besides thousands of white-robed Klansmen, you see a few of them here, there were brightly robed Klan leaders on horseback, Ku Klux Klan bands, automobile floats, and an airplane flying overhead with a cross illuminated with white lights on the bottom of its fuselage. And the people you see on the roof there and along the side, please understand they're cheering. Back at the fairgrounds, it was time for the naturalization ceremony, where these people are being welcomed into the Klan. So you have 15,000 Klansmen forming a ring around 7,000 kneeling initiates. The people in dark who don't have their robes yet, they're kneeling, 7,000 of them. And there were 10,000 spectators in the stands. The ceremony included songs by the KKK Glee Club. The huge cross was set ablaze. The plane reappeared, but now with its cross illuminated by red bulbs. The Grand Kleagle led the Klan wannabes in an oath in which they proclaimed their pure American nationality. After the lighting of the large crosses on either side of the platform, which you can see there, the Kleagle welcomed the eager candidates into the Ku Klux Klan. This long day concluded with a fireworks show, which included fiery displays that spelled out "without reproach and without fear." September 21, 1923. One of the most significant features of American life in the 1920s was the inescapable, powerful presence of what historians refer to as the Second Ku Klux Klan. The Second Klan is connected to and distinct from the First Ku Klux Klan. The first KKK emerged in the South in the years after the Civil War, during the decade or so, 1865 to 1875, known as Reconstruction. During these years, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were enacted, abolishing slavery, establishing African Americans were citizens, and giving black males the right to vote. With federal troops present throughout the South, the newly freed slaves could now move about freely, attend school, vote, and hold office. Reconstruction is this very brief moment in American history when one can imagine that, when it comes to race, it could have all gone very differently. But it was not to be. In the post-Civil War South, there was very strong opposition to the end of white supremacy. One of the white resistance groups that emerged, and there were many, was the Ku Klux Klan. The goal of the Klan and similar groups was to terrorize African Americans into not exercising their newly won rights as American citizens. By whatever means necessary, these white Southerners were determined to regain their former dominance. And so they did. They succeeded because the vast majority of white Southerners wanted to return to white supremacy. They also succeeded because white Northerners did not care in the end about protecting black people. By the 1870s, the federal troops were gone. Southern whites were now free to reestablish white dominance and place African Americans into conditions as close to slavery as possible. While the Klan disappeared, it disappeared because it had won. By 1900, Jim Crow segregation was in place, as well as voting laws that essentially ended black voting in the South. The 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, was still in force, but barely. But the 14th and 15th Amendments were irrelevant in the region. The North, the federal government, the Supreme Court, all happily went along with this. Not coincidentally, a new version of American history emerged at this time in the South and in the North. And I should say, my guess is that many of you, I did, grew up with this history. The revisionist history was most dramatically portrayed in D.W. Griffith's 1915 cinematic masterpiece, Birth of a Nation. Birth of a Nation tells this story. Slaves were happy workers. The Civil War was unnecessary. The North repressed the South after the war. Blacks in Southern state legislatures were thoroughly corrupt and incompetent. Rapacious black males roamed the land looking for white women to assault. Then enter the heroes of the film and of this history, the Ku Klux Klan. They restored sexual order, lynching the prospective black rapist. They restored political order, using military force to keep blacks from voting. And they restored religious order. The film ends weirdly. It has got to be one of the weirdest film endings I've ever seen. The film ends weirdly with an image of Jesus blessing the redeemed South. Lots of white Americans love the film. Lots of white Ohioans love the film. There's an ad from a Cincinnati newspaper. One of the white Americans who loved the film was President Woodrow Wilson, who had his own private screening in the White House. Actually, Wilson is quoted in this silent film, quote, "The white men were roused by a mere instinct of self-preservation until at last there had sprung into existence a great Ku Klux Klan, a veritable empire of the South to protect the Southern country," unquote. One particularly thrilled filmgoer was Georgia's Colonel William Simmons. Colonel, I should just say, doesn't refer to military rank. It referred to a position he held in this fraternal organization known as Woodmen of the World, but he insisted on being called Colonel Simmons, all right? Colonel Simmons, quote unquote, was inspired by Birth of a Nation to revive the Ku Klux Klan. On Thanksgiving Day, 1915, Simmons and 14 friends went to the top of Stone Mountain in Georgia and lit a cross. And I have to point out, the original Klan did not light crosses. Griffith had crosses lit for Birth of a Nation for the film, and the Second KK follows this practice. They lit a cross to announce the founding of the Second Ku Klux Klan, with Simmons, of course, as Imperial Wizard. The Second Klan remained tiny for a few years as the Great War raged in Europe. But after the war, 1920, Colonel Simmons employed a marketing firm to promote his new organization. The firm hired professional salesmen in Klan lingo, and there's a ton of Klan lingo. In Klan lingo, these guys were called Kliegels. These professional salesmen were hired to recruit members. Driven by the fact that they got to keep $4 out of every $10 initiation fee, Kliegels aggressively and successfully targeted fraternal organizations and churches. Protestant ministers could join for free. Keep this point in mind, I'll kind of come back to this later. Screenings of Birth of a Nation were used as recruiting events. All of this was incredibly successful. The white-robed Klansmen and Klanswomen, on the left we have a Klan wedding, on the right, Klanswomen. These Klansmen and Klanswomen with their fiery crosses and their fiery rhetoric seemed to be everywhere in the first half of the 1920s. And there's a women's conclave in Dayton. They seemed to be everywhere. West Virginia and Washington, Colorado and Kansas, Chicago, and this incredible Klan march, Washington, D.C., 1925. Historians have estimated, and I have to say this is a conservative estimate, but I'm going with it. Historians have estimated that at its high point, 5 million Americans, 4% of the total population of the United States, were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Unlike the first Klan, this second Klan was a truly national organization with chapters from coast to coast. Now, Indiana was the site of the Klan's greatest achievements, with control of the governor's office and other state-level positions. The Klan controlled Indiana government. But Ohio, it appears, had more Klan members than any other state in the Union, with 400,000 members at its peak. To quote one historian who's written on this, during the 1920s, it seemed that the mask and hood had become the official symbol of the Buckeye State. And just to give you a few examples here, we have Middletown, Bowling Green. The Klan loved to go to both churches and schools, march in, present some kind of gift there, and walk away. And here we have the Klan in a school outside Bowling Green. Women's Klan in Akron. Klan in Lima and Springfield. Another one from Springfield. Springfield was a hotbed. And Marietta. Oh, yeah, I should mention I gave a talk right outside that building in Marietta. That was a weird event. And then Youngstown. One reason the KKK was so appealing is that it presented itself as a supremely patriotic organization. The phrase they used, as I mentioned before, was 100% American. And to be 100% American meant that you were a white Anglo-Saxon and you were determined to oppress the other. Here in the Midwest, immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe were the primary target of hate. I'll come back to this. On the West Coast, Asian Americans were the focus. In the South, the Klan focused on Latinos. In the South, of course, the dominant emphasis was keeping black men and women in their place, the goal being to ensure that there was no challenge to white supremacy. The Southern version of the second KKK and their allies used violence, a lot of violence, including the lynchings, this is amazing, the lynching of black World War I veterans in their uniforms. They used violence in an effort to terrify blacks into submission. But to be 100% American did not just mean you were white. It also meant that you were Christian. The KKK is the quintessential white Christian nationalist organization. Every conclave included crosses everywhere. Every Klan meeting house had an altar upon which the Bible was open to Romans 12, 1 and 2. Quote, I appeal to you therefore, brothers and sisters, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, unquote. When Klansmen were initiated into the organization, they sang, this is part of their ritual, the revival hymn, Just as I Am Without One Plea. And Jesus was celebrated as the first Klansman. But to the 1920s Klan, to be 100% American did not just mean you were a white Christian. It meant you were a white Protestant Christian. In the years between 1890 and 1920, a flood of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe came to America. I'm sure some of you can trace your history back to this. Between 1890 and 1920, this flood of immigrants to America from Southern and Eastern Europe, most of whom were Catholic and Jewish. In the eyes of the Klan, such immigrants were polluting America. As Colonel Simmons declared, America is not a melting pot, it's a garbage can, and the Catholics and Jews are the garbage, unquote. While the Klan is viciously anti-Semitic, there were so many more Catholic immigrants, and thus the second Klan, especially here in the Midwest, focused much of its animus against Catholics. This was certainly the case with the Ohio KKK. The rhetorical attacks in the Klan newspapers published in Ohio, the Klan Courier and the Ohio Fiery Cross, were not subtle. I'm just going to read a couple quotes from these papers. Catholic schools are un-American and dangerous, a threat to public education while also being breeding grounds for criminals. Only 5% of our juvenile delinquents are graduates of public schools. 65% of juvenile delinquents are graduates of parochial schools. Just to point out, fabricating facts has always been a feature of hate groups. Politically, Catholics were simply papal puppets, voting as they were told to vote by the Pope. Quote, Romanism, through its priests, invades society and politics and commands obedience. It's the oldest and most relentless tyranny known to the human race, unquote. Now, reading through these Ohio newspapers, which I did, they include a monthly list of Klan rallies. I'm going to show you a sample of Ohio cities and towns in 1923 and 24 that hosted major rallies. And when I say major, thousands or tens of thousands of people came to these rallies. These are Ohio towns that sponsored such rallies. Bowling Green, this is a sample. Bowling Green, Camden, Cincinnati, Coshocton, Dayton, Dover, Findlay, Greenville, Hamilton, Hillsborough, Jefferson, Lima, Lisbon, Marietta, Marion, New Philadelphia, Orrville, Painesville, Plain City, Sidney, Springfield, Urbana, Troy, Wapakoneta, Xenias, Youngstown, and Zanesville. As far as urban centers of Klan activity in Ohio, 2 cities were at the top of the list, Youngstown and Dayton. In fact, these 2 cities were in the top 6 in the nation in the highest percentage of residents who were Klan members. The other 4, Dallas, Denver, Portland, Oregon, and Indianapolis. As regards Dayton, historians estimate that 15,000 Daytonians, 10% of the total population and 20% of the white Protestant population, were members of the Klan. In the 20s, both Youngstown and Dayton experienced an influx of large numbers of Catholic immigrants and smaller numbers of Jewish immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe to work in the factories. This influx of, quote, aliens, unquote, bred a great deal of Protestant resentment. I should mention here, just to be clear, the great migration of African Americans to Midwest had just started in the early 1920s. So while if the Ohio Klan, of course, hated people of color, they always hate people of color, their focus was on immigrants, Catholics and Jews. The Klan's strength in Dayton was made visible by these huge Klan rallies, but there were also cross burnings, lots and lots of cross burnings. Newspaper articles and oral interviews reveal a Dayton illuminated by burning crosses in the 1920s. One woman who was a teenager in those years admitted that 7 decades later, she's still spooked by the memory of crosses burning almost every night outside her home. Another woman reported she was scared to death by the constant cross burnings in her working class neighborhood. And another Catholic resident of Dayton reported that the massive Klan parades through the city, this is just one, plus the burning crosses, brought home to her the reality that the threat of Klan violence was always there. The local chapter of the Klan focused many of its attacks on the University of Dayton, which, if you don't know, is a Catholic university. It's no coincidence that the major Klan rallies were just 2 to 3 blocks away from the University of Dayton campus. To be 100% American meant that you were a white Protestant. And to the Ohio Klan, University of Dayton was the headquarters of Catholic subversion in Ohio, with a ROTC program that they claimed was training a Catholic army to fight religious wars against American Protestants. The primary means of intimidating UD was the burning of crosses. One student later recalled that it was the Klan's joy and delight to come out on the campus and burn a cross or 2. But when a burning cross was planted on campus, students would race out of their class or dorms to chase the Klansmen away, all the while calling on the cowards, quote, show your faces. So the Klan started lighting crosses in a cemetery across from campus, as the cemetery fence gave the Klansmen some protection. On one occasion, University of Dayton football coach Harry Bojan, who happens to be in the Hall of Fame, learned that the Klan was en route to the cemetery to burn a cross. So as he recounted in a later interview, he went to the dorms and called out, quote, "all my big football players." Gathering them near the cemetery, he instructed his players to wait until the Klansmen got around that cross and started to light it. The cross ablaze, he exhorted his players to take off after them, tear their shirts off, or anything else, whatever you want to do. But the Klansmen saw them coming. As Bojan lamented, "We never got near any of them as they went so fast through that cemetery." But student resistance did not dampen the Klan's desire to intimidate Dayton's Catholic University. Wednesday, December 19, 1923 was the first day of Christmas break. By evening, there were fewer than 40 students on campus. At 10:30, the calm was shattered by a series of explosions. Students leaped out of their beds and ran out into the night. Outside, they discovered that 12 bombs had been exploded throughout campus. No one sustained serious injuries. Property damage was minimal. It could have been much worse, given that at least one bomb went off near buildings that stored ROTC guns and ammunition. But what caught the eyes of the frightened students shivering in the cold was a blazing 8-foot oil-soaked cross on the west edge of campus. As the students ran toward the cross, the idea being to tear it down, they discovered the perpetrators waiting for them. Several hundred Klansmen had filled 40 to 50 cars, which they very slowly drove in single file, all the while shouting a volley of threats at the students. But the tables soon turned. The detonations of the bombs, the glare from the burning cross, the shouts of the invaders jolted hundreds of residents out of their houses. I should mention I'm quoting from the Dayton Daily News of the time. Angry at losing their sleep, the folks from the neighborhood, many or most of whom were Catholic, charged the hooded intruders, yelling their own threats. The alarmed Klansmen hit the gas, sped off into the night. The incident was the high point of Klan attacks on the University of Dayton. There were no more bombings, but the Dayton Police Department, which was rumored with a lot of evidence to be filled with Klansmen, never identified the bombers or brought them to justice. The Klan continued to burn crosses and on and near campus, as well as hold large rallies at the fairgrounds near campus. It was not until the late 1920s that the University of Dayton could begin to consider itself safe from terror, administered by these 100% Americans. In the first half of the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan was a huge presence in the United States. The Klan peaked around 1925, the year of this incredible march in Washington. But over the next few years, the Klan suffered a precipitous decline, as not surprisingly, the Klan leadership was not made up of the best people. Most dramatically, the Grand Dragon of the Indiana Klan raped and murdered his secretary, and the subsequent trial helped reveal all the ways he had bribed and manipulated Indiana politicians. And if you're interested, this is a remarkable book on that story, Fever in the Heartland. By 1930, the Ku Klux Klan had dwindled in numbers and influence, but it had achieved major victories. In the South, the Klan had helped ensure that white supremacy would remain the order of the day until the 1960s. More than this, the Klan won the day on immigration. Thanks in good part to Klan lobbying efforts and Klansmen serving in Congress, the Immigration Act of 1924 became the law of the land. This law, which remained relatively unchanged until the 1960s, established that each European nation would have an annual immigration quota based on 2% of the number of foreign-born persons from that nation living in America in 1890, the year just before the influx of immigrants from Catholic and Jewish Europe. This 1924 Fiery Cross cartoon refers to those who were denied entrance to the United States as cast-offs, undesirables, rubbish. One of the tragic effects of this law came in the 1930s and 1940s. As Nazi Germany established control over much of Eastern and Southern Europe, the American government refused to adjust the immigration quotas. As a result, it was very difficult for Jewish refugees to get into the United States, thus facilitating their eventual execution in Nazi death camps. While the Second Klan faded in the late 1920s, it did not die. A spin-off of the KKK, the Black Legion, was very strong here in Ohio in the 1930s, with an estimated 100,000 members. With their black robes and masks, the Black Legion was more violent and radical than the KKK, killing at least 50 people, including African Americans, union organizers, and political leftists. Malcolm X was convinced that it was the Black Legion who killed his father in East Lansing, Michigan in 1931. Third KKK emerged in the 50s and 60s to lead the charge against the civil rights movement, in the process bringing back the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag had all but disappeared, but with this third KKK, they brought it back as a symbol of white dominance. And now we have a fourth or fifth KKK, as well as a multiplicity of Klan-like organizations. White supremacy remains with us, to the point that over the past few years, as documented by the Homeland Security Office in 2023, white supremacists have been the #1 perpetrators of domestic extremist violence. The novelist William Faulkner had it right. The past is not dead, it's not even past. From the beginning in this country, we've had this ongoing conflict over who can truly be an American. On one hand, we have those who argue that anyone can become an American, along with being able to speak basic English and having a rudimentary understanding of American history and government. One simply needs to affirm their loyalty to the ideas and ideals enshrined in the Constitution. On the other hand, we have those in this country who argue that to be truly, fully American, 100% American as it were, one needs to be the right race, the right ethnicity, the right religion, the right gender orientation. The 1920s Ku Klux Klan held this view. A century later, it's not clear whether the Klan is on the winning or losing side of the argument over who can be an American. Thank you. And now we have time for questions.
I'll take the first one here.
Can you talk about the uniforms and also the why a burning cross?
Okay, I'll take the last one first. The burning cross, right, I mean, there's a way in which you're the Christian organization, you're burning a cross. How does that work, right? But there was this visual appeal that comes in Birth of a Nation, and they capitalized on it, even if you can make an argument that it doesn't make sense. In terms of the robes, and I will just throw in lingo and whatever, the Klan deliberately tried to be exotic. There was this way in which to appeal to people. They wanted to look exotic, medieval, whatever, okay? It's not necessarily that it made a lot of sense, but it was designed to appeal. So I've been asked, like, what does Ku Klux Klan mean? In the end, it means nothing, right? But it's language, right? It supposedly dates back to Celtic rituals and so forth, but that's not what they're not trying to be that way. What they're trying to do is appeal to people, and there's a certain exoticism. Since you asked that question, I'm going to add something else here that I left out, right? Because there's so much to say about the Second Klan. It's going to sound weird that I say this, given what I just talked about, but the Second Klan was a social organization. They had softball teams. They had choirs. I mentioned they had a glee club, right? fraternal organizations were big in the U.S., and the Klan presented itself as a fraternal organization. It's just a fraternal organization based on hate. That's what they were. Any other questions? Okay.
I noticed that neither Cleveland nor Columbus is on the list of Ohio cities that you listed. And I can understand Cleveland because it has this huge immigrant Eastern European, Southern European population. But I don't understand why Columbus would not have been on that list.
Yeah, the Columbus could have been. They weren't their presence, the rallies weren't as big as elsewhere, but they certainly were there. They were also here in Cleveland. But you're absolutely right. The fact that as you get closer to Cleveland, you're going to find less of this because of the ethnic makeup of the population. But one of the striking things about researching this was to discover how it's all over the state. Now, probably the strongest areas, and this won't surprise you, is along the Ohio River. The southernmost areas had the most Klan members, but it is a statewide organization. I don't remember if I had Toledo on there, but Toledo had, even though it's close to Detroit, and you might imagine their ethnic population would rule against it, Toledo also had rallies.
I'm not sure you can speak about this or not, but I have read that Elon Musk's company, Tesla, the emblem for that company is related to the KKK, especially the hood of the KKK.
I have heard this. I have not seen that documented for sure. It wouldn't be a shocker to me, but I don't know if that's true. I'll leave it at that. Yes.
I always try to understand hate if that's possible. But to me, the hardest part of this is is this more like promoting their own self-worth, or is it more like being better than other people? And how do they tie that to Christianity?
There's a lot I can say about this in response to this question. I'll say a little bit. You can read the Klan publications of the 20s like you can read white Christian nationalist publications today. And there's this incredible fear that America and American civilization is disappearing due to the other. So there is a lot of fear. There's also the effort to say that we're the ones who are the true Americans. How Christianity gets plugged into this, and especially how Jesus gets plugged into it, on one hand is a mystery. On the other hand, and I'm a religious, by the way, I'm also in religious studies department, so I do religious history. I also have to say that over the centuries, Christianity has been used for all sorts of purposes, right? All sorts of purposes and nationalistic purposes. As a Christian, as a Catholic, I have to confess it completely blows my mind. But as a historian, I have to say, yeah, and it happened here, and it happened here, and it happened here, and it happened here. The one thing I want to stress is that if you want to understand the KKK, today, 100 years ago, whatever, please understand that they understood themselves as the quintessential Christian organization. Whatever we think about it, they're the ones that have crosses everywhere. They understood themselves that what they were doing was in line with Christianity. That's how they understood it. Is it problematic? Oh yeah, it's problematic. But that's how they understood themselves. There's one back.
Hi. Do you have any comments on the Catholic churches being attacked and the parishioners, blocking the doors? Any organized efforts at that?
Yeah, the whole story of the Catholic response to the Klan is very interesting. And there was some Catholic resistance. But I have to say that in my research, there was more an effort, a desire for this just to go away. So I'll give you an example. Here's my example. I never planned on writing on the Ku Klux Klan. That was not a goal of mine, a scholarly goal. And I was hired by the University of Dayton. And 2 weeks after I was hired at this Catholic university, the chancellor of the school, a Marianist priest, comes out of his office and summons me in and says, "You do religious history, right?" "Yes." "Okay, I've got a conference coming up here in November of Catholics and Jews. I want you to write an article on religious conflict in Dayton." I have been in Dayton 2 weeks. I don't know anything. But I also don't have tenure, so I say yes. Okay, here's the thing this is my answer to this question. I had a small class, I said, we're turning this into a research seminar. You're going to help me write this article. I've got 3 months to have this thing out. They were great, by the way. And what I discovered is that this story was unknown at the university. I mean unknown. I mean there was nothing on it in official publications. In fact, the University History of 2000, which came out after I started at UD, has 0 on Klan attacks. And in fact, my first public presentation on this topic at the university, I finished my talk, and a prominent faculty member stood up, older faculty member stood up and said that this was a fiction. And I said to her, "Ma'am, please just read the Dayton Daily News, because it's not hidden." But UD had worked to hide it, to assimilate. UD wanted to be American. And I have to say that for a lot of Catholic churches, that was the goal, to just have this go away so that they're not tarred as completely un-American. So there were Catholics who resisted, yes. There were also a lot of Catholics who just wanted it to go away. And I will just add one more thing. Southern and Eastern Europeans were not seen as white in these years. That's a whole thing about who's defined as white. World War II gave Catholics in America a great chance to prove their Americanness. They become white, and so this kind of stigma starts to fade, and especially after the Kennedy election. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Yes.
Some of your statistics about membership were rather shocking.
Yes.
It seems like they were very successful in recruiting.
Yes.
So I'm curious about, did they have newspapers, radio? Were they out in the public?
Oh, yes.
And could you tie it to some of the online recruiting that seems to be going
yeah.
on now?
Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. First, regarding the online, the current Klan is not nearly as effective in that regard as groups like the Patriot Front. So there are hate groups that are doing much better online recruiting than the Klan is today. But I would connect this, yes, you're right. So the 2 Klan newspapers I referenced, published in Ohio, had huge readership, and they had impact. And if you read those newspapers, which is hard to do in a way because it's painful to read, but they are advertising these rallies, and they're inviting 100% Americans, they're encouraging 100% Americans to defend their nation by going after these aliens. They are very good at recruiting, but the other part of it is, and I haven't quite figured out what to do with this, they were also a social organization. So people who didn't have this kind of community connection or whatever, the Klan would provide it. I mean, they had all sorts of clubs, and these softball teams would play other teams, really quite remarkable. Yes, they were extremely effective at recruiting. Now, one story about that. Some of these people came to regret it. So back to the football coach, Harry Bojan, who stood up against the Klan in Dayton. He was a big deal in the Dayton community. He was at a luncheon like 1927, 28, the Klan had faded. And these 3 or 4 guys that he took as friends, who also served as referees, came up to him at this dinner and said, "Harry, we apologize, we screwed up, we joined that nutcase organization, we were wrong." Okay? So there was some of that. There were some people who came to see it lots didn't.
I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for being here and giving
thank
this
you.
talk.
Thank you.
I'm from Dayton. I've learned a lot. None of this was covered in education, in history classes,
to
and I
laugh,
love
but yes.
historians for what you bring to light. It's very important. I think
Thank
we
you.
need to do more history so that we have an understanding. I also have a grandfather who is a Methodist pastor and a grandmother who is a Quaker. So I've always found this whole dynamic in the country with the Klan and everything interesting. And I think we all got at least a dose of history from 2020. A lot of churches did Bible studies. And there I learned that the first cross that was burned on top of Stone Mountain was set in place by a Southern Methodist, excuse me, to the Baptist, a Southern Methodist pastor who, I guess, thought that was a great idea. So I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to repair and a lot that we continue to share with each other. So again, thank you for bringing this to light. I hope we have more sessions like this. So thanks.
Thank you, and I just want to follow up on your comment. I have to say, as a historian and as one who is religious, lots and lots and lots and lots of Protestant churches not only went along with it, but supported it and encouraged it. And that's just the reality. All right, I'll just leave it at that. Yes?
Just to maybe give us hope for the future, do you have any idea why 5 million of these people suddenly threw away their robes? And were they suddenly embarrassed to wear them in public?
Yeah, it's a mixed story. What I would argue is some were, like those referees in Dayton, who were embarrassed that they had joined this hate organization, yes. For a lot of them, the Klan had won. So the immigration was huge, and they won on immigration, right? And so, for example, in the American government there were appeals to change the restrictions when it came out about what was happening to Jews. The U.S. government was committed to this and said no, right? So some, because they won, some did change. There is reason for hope, but I would also say, even though, I say that as a person who lectures on depressing topics, I do think there's hope, but I also think it's really important that we see the history for what it is. So, for example, at the University of Dayton, Sue and I just retired like weeks ago. And one of the great things they do at UD is that when you retire, you get to pick a book that meant a lot to you, and they put it in the library with like a nameplate for you and a quote from you about the book. And it didn't take me very long to figure out what my book would be. It was W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction, which is an incredible book, 1935. And in that book, he has this quote, which I just treasure. And I can't get it right, but this is close. Nations do awful and terrible things. Nations do glorious and wonderful things. Isn't it better to tell the truth about all of this? And that would be my argument.
I was just curious about the South and the philosophy that the South will rise again. Did that have anything to do with the Ku Klux Klan?
Oh, they played on that. Thank you. They played on it a lot. And I thank you for bringing up the South, because this is this lecture is on the Midwest. And I want to emphasize something. The Midwestern Klan had incidents of violence. The Southern Klan was built on violence, in good part because the majority of a good number of Southern populace supported this. So you have all these lynchings. Most of the lynchings occur in the South, and they're of black people, right? So South will rise again continues to be very much at the heart of Klan and related organizations, and this is what they mean. And so the Confederate flag remains a symbol, however you want to structure it, of white dominance. And the Patriot Front's march in D.C. at the 250th anniversary, can you see them? They've got included in there they had Confederate flags. Yeah, they had Confederate flags, which is sort of okay. So this remains. This does not go away. That's a whole other thing. I have another lecture that I give on Confederate monuments. I would come back and do that if you wanted. That's more depressing than this one, actually, which is hard to believe. But your question's a good one. Yes.
As a historian and author, have you personally ever felt threatened by any of these members of the organization that you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes. I'll just put it, that's a short answer. I gave a talk, I can't remember exactly where it was right now here in Ohio, where I walk in and the organizer of the event said, I have to warn you, there are Klan members in the audience who want to hear this. They were decent to me, they weren't terrible. I gave a talk near Akron. This was on Confederate monuments, where this man was furious with me. Sue was there. She was afraid. He seemed violent, and it didn't look good because he was so angry because I said the Civil War was about slavery. And that just sent him off, and he was furious. And so I learned a trick growing up that I used. It's not brilliant. I wouldn't advise this, but it's what I learned. Is he was in the audience, and so I went and stood next to him. So I thought, if you're going to attack me, I'm going to be right here. You're going to come right here and attack me. And he ended up leaving furiously and marched out. And I've had some bad email correspondence, right? But I've also had something like I heard here, also people grateful that we talk about this, who shared Du Bois's idea that we should talk about the good and the bad of history, right? And that we should know it. So I'm grateful for that. So overall, I'm grateful there have been threats.
I have a very good question. So let's come to,
Can you wait for the microphone, please? We have people queued up.
okay. So my question is, knowing what you know, your history, and thank you so much. This is one of the most interesting lectures I've ever attended. But let's take it back to today and kind of look into the political impact that these movements are having. Where do you see the next couple years? Because now we're entering in the political arena with support of some of this.
Yes. Well, I really have hope, because, so I want to get back to the threats question because it relates to this. I've given this talk and the Confederate Monuments talk throughout the state, this probably 30 times. And here's the striking thing. The vast majority of people are receptive and want to hear. And when I do, and this is small towns and cities, I'm talking about the whole state, right? Places I had never been before. And I give this talk, and people want to hear and want to learn. That gives me more hope than almost anything, that I can talk about this, and I talk to people who aren't in the academy and aren't super politically organized or involved or whatever, who want to know this and want to hear it. And that gives me hope. I can't say much more than that because I don't know where we're headed. This is the great thing about being a historian. The number one word for historian for me is contingency. You don't know. I will make, Sue will tell you I make predictions, but I shouldn't, because predictions, we can't predict. So I hold to contingency, but I also have some hope. Right.
When you describe the recruitment stuff, it's always amazing to me that there's a fairly good-sized number of people who aren't hard to recruit, and I kind of feel like
Right.
they're operating out of a lack somewhere in their life, like when that young man got shot in, I think, Georgia by a father and two sons, and the trial came up and the father looked at the son and said, well, if you're not better than him, who are you better than? There's that lack. And I'm like, okay, so where are pastors and other people standing in the, why can't we look at the lack? Why can't we do something about this psyche that allows them to be drawn into baseball games out of an organization of hate instead of some other way to fill that gap?
Right. Well, I'd be incredible if I could actually answer that question. I can't, but what I can say is that the way you put it is a good one in terms of lack. There's a lack of community, a lack of love, a lack of self-esteem. That's all very present. And so I'll just make this comment about the second Klan, okay? Instead of a general comment, let me make a specific comment. One of the things that's become clear to me, I've started to write on this a little bit, one of the things that's become clear to me is the importance of World War I. And one of the things that happened in World War I is that Americans actually didn't want to go to that war, and the Wilson administration wanted it to go to war, and they went all out to demonize the opposition, to get people worked up so that they would send their boys to war. I don't know how else to put it. That's what happened. And then the war ends, and it ends for America quickly. America's not in that war hardly any time at all, and all of a sudden it's over. But all the hate that's been generated is still there. And all these people being told that there's a threat inside the borders, and we have to get them. And so out of that, I left that out of the talk, but the Klan explodes not just because they have great Kliegels who are recruiting people, but also because there's this climate, this political climate in which the enemies are here, we have to take care of them. The war's over, all right, but they're inside our borders, we have to take care of them. So you have the Red Scare, where they send off people to Russia. You've got the Red Summer, which is an incredible summer of violence against blacks. And you have the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan. So it's related somewhat to that effort. But it's a great question.
Can I take how about one more question?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
No.
Could you tell us how, with this attitude in the country, that Jack Kennedy got elected and that the Kennedys were strong in our government? How did that ever happen with the Klan?
Great question. That's a great question. Okay, well, first, for those of you who don't, I'm sure you all know this, but I'll just tell you that the anti-Catholic sentiment against Kennedy in the '60 election was huge. That's correct. But I would also argue that anti-Catholicism was fading. It wasn't what it was in 1930. By 1960, and Catholics had worked really hard, American Catholics had worked very hard to show their true patriotism in World War II. So it wasn't the same level. They couldn't, they tried to use the anti-Catholicism. The opposing political party made that effort, but they were not nearly as effective as they were in 1928 when you have Al Smith running for president. They weren't nearly as effective. And so there's another question buried in there I'll just mention, and then I know it's our last question, so okay, I won't go on about it. But one of the questions that somebody could ask is, okay, so where do Catholics fit in this today? And it's a different climate. And for many Catholics have become now seen as truly American. And that has had real effects on the political climate. Other religious groups take the brunt now, including Jews and Muslims. Okay, that's...
All right, we're going to wrap it up there.
Thank you. Thank you.